See, the reality is these are signs. And then further down, God gives us another sign, which is when He delivers you safely to land. He helps you and He delivers you safely. And you're very grateful at this point, but then you turn away. God says that these people, they become very moderate in faith. They turn away from God. They go back to their lives, back to doing what they're doing. They forget about God. They turn away from Him. They become ungrateful.
Well, so I have had this experience as a Christian, as a religious person. I would suffer hardships and I'd pray to God. And once I got out of that hardship or I was in the clear, I just went back to, my sort of lackadaisical Christian ways, right? But the point that I'm making is that I was already religious. I already believe that God exists. I have not done that whatsoever as an atheist. And I don't know if you're trying to shit on the religious people that aren't as devout as you are, but that's kind of how it comes across here. The sense that I get from you is that you're really chastising those that aren't as devoted to the religion as you are. And I don't know. I kind of feel like that's kind of a shitty thing to do.
Right? This is the situation of life. This is our situation as human beings. Unfortunately, many people deliberately deny these signs. They deliberately turn away. And God gives everyone signs. But people have deliberately decided to cover them up, turn away from them, and just get on with what they're doing. This is true injustice to oneself. Then these people, they want evidence. They want proof of God. It's like saying somebody walking out on a very sunny, bright day on a beach, goes to a seaside and the sun is shining. They stick their head in the sand and then they say, give me proof of the sun.
You see, this little anecdote right here, meaning to suggest that atheists bury their heads in the sand and are asking for evidence of God when it's all around them, I just don't see that in reality. I'm sitting here going through YouTube or going through the various books that I bought on the existence of God or Jesus, or I haven't really bought any books in relation to Islam, really, but I'm working my way in that direction. I'm actually searching. I'm not putting my head into the sand and just wanting people to deliver to me the evidence and choose not to see it. I'm actively searching for the evidence. And the problem is that every single argument that I come across, every single piece of evidence that I come across does not sufficiently prove that God exists. Now, that's just me being all rational, ungrateful, and traitorous and shit, I guess. But the fact is that there's no evidence that sufficiently supports the conclusion that God exists. And this is just based on the evidence that we have right now. So it's not me burying my head in the sand. This is me carefully analyzing all the arguments and evidence and still not being convinced. You would think that if this God actually does exist, he would have some kind of evidence to point in his direction, but just don't have it.
This is what we're doing. The signs are all around us, just like the blazing sun that will surround this person. But if you choose to stick your head in the sand and then ask for evidence for God, unfortunately, there's no one that can help you.
See, I feel that this is just an easy way for them to just say, well, God exists, and that's an obvious fact. And if it's not obvious to you, they can just disregard you, ignore you, and go about talking to people that already believe in the God that they believe in. And so it just comes across as a very lazy way of disregarding those that are not convinced. When I feel like you should definitely listen to those that are not convinced and find out why they're not convinced and how that relates to why you believe in this God. See, that would be what a rational and reasonable person would do in order to sort of self-reflect on the beliefs that they hold. But fuck that shit. Give me that Allah shit. Come on, give me that book. I only believe what's in the book. Another issue I have with this particular statement is that it pushes the problem onto the person that's not convinced. I'm not choosing to be not convinced. I'm just not convinced. And that's not a problem for me. That's a problem for your God. If your God does exist, then he should have some evidence to back up his existence. That's not a me problem. That's a him problem.
So if you are sincere and you want to find the truth, then reflect over your own life, because that is the greatest sign. That is one of the greatest signs. And reflect over the book of God, the Quran, which is another sign, right?
Well, okay, so other than the Quran that you mentioned there as being a sign from God, which, again, you haven't provided any kind of evidence that it is a sign from God or it comes from God or anything like that, other than the Quran says so, which is kind of circular reasoning there. But how do you differentiate our existence as being a sign from your particular version of God? How do you differentiate this sign as being from your God versus the Christian God or any other God that exists in history? Fuck, Zeus. How do you know that it's not Zeus that created us all? Now, I don't think in the, Roman or Grecian mythologies that Zeus is the one that did this, or that created things and whatnot. But in any case, how do you discern between your God and other gods? What gives you the indication that your God is the one that did all this shit? I'm not hearing any kind of argument in this entire video that differentiates your God from other supernatural beings.
Reflect over these things, really think about these things, my friends, brothers and sisters, and realize, just to conclude and summarize, don't go by this false narrative and idea that science is the only way to truth, logical arguments are the only way to truth. No, God is giving you something far more personal, far more powerful, which are His ayat, His signs. Turn towards them, reflect over your own life, and worship the creator of everything that exists, the one that gives us everything, the one that loves us more than our own mothers, and turn to Him and worship Him alone.
So I like how you're sitting there telling people, disregard any scientific evidence, disregard any good logical, sound logical arguments, because neither of those things work well with my fucking shitty signs argument here. You have to disregard all logic and soundness and scientific evidence, which would just be evidence that of reality, whatever exists in reality. Just disregard all that evidence and just fucking believe without evidence in this God and believe that these are signs. It's definitely more convenient for you to do that because these other things just kind of get in the way. I understand now why you were shitting on rationality and coming to conclusions based on evidence and soundness of the logic and everything. I get now why you have to do that. It's because your signs from God argument is bullshit. Well, heathens, that's going to be it for this video today. All in all, I found his argument in the video to be very detrimental to just basic argumentation for the God of the Quran. Because he's basically telling you to disregard everything and just believe in this God without any kind of evidence or reason really to believe in the God. Just believe in it. Worship it because Allah, and that's it. It's kind of like a presuppositional argument in that way, that he presupposes his God exists and that all of these things are signs that directly point to his God because he already presupposes that he exists. It's kind of circular. I find this entire video to be somewhat circular. It's also somewhat abusive because he's trying to convince you that unless you're convinced that these are signs of God, then the problem is really with you and not being convinced. He fails to acknowledge that this God, he has the burden of proof here. Like, the burden of proof is on the person that says this God exists. And this God should provide some kind of proof if he were to exist. That's not a me problem there, Imran. That's a God problem.